Three, two, one. Recording. Recording. We're recording. We are recording. Nosotros estamos recordamos. All right, what you got, Alan?
That was pretty good Spanish.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's been a while. Used to be almost fluent. But you know what they say, if you don't lose it, it's because you used it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. Welcome, everyone, to Saber Martial Arts Podcast. I think we're around episode like 64, 65 by now, which is hella cool to me. We actually, if you're hearing this, you will have just come off of the high that was the three Sparchives episodes for the Saber Light Knights tournament this past year. And, man, those episodes were fire. I'm not just saying that because I'm biased. I mean, I'm saying it because I'm biased, but I'm not just saying it because I'm biased. I had so much fun with more fun than I thought I was going to have. And I thought I was going to have fun way more than I thought I was going to have.
All right.
So Alan, coming up on my second week of teaching a new Saber class here. We'll just jump right into this episode. Yes, it is. It feels great to be back in action with that. And I only had a couple students show up this first week. There was some stuff going on in the community, and in a small community like this, if you lose, 5 of the people that you thought were going to show up to another event, then you're losing everybody. But that's okay. Like I know. I've got more kids that have decided they want to show up this coming week. I've got a couple of adults that have said, "Hey, I had to work last week, but I want to come this week." So the natural progression is to want to get right into like combat and stuff, but you can't. You do that right away, especially with people who don't have gear, and that's kind of what I'm doing. So we're jumping right in. The topic at hand today would be. In a nutshell, we're going to talk about fight choreography. We're not going to tackle it maybe exactly as you would think we'd tackle it. We're not really going to talk about it from the perspective of stage fighting, though we both have plenty of experience with stage fighting. We're going to talk about it more like play fighting, I think. This would be, in my opinion, and everybody has one of those, more of the martial artist way to approach choreography, because choreography does still have its place, be it in kata or in prescribed combinations for drilling, or even just playtime in the dojo. Traditional martial artists do choreography of all kinds. And when you don't have, or when you're starting a new class, or maybe you don't have all the gear and things that you would need for full contact saber fighting, this is a great way to employ some of the techniques and things that you're learning in the martial arts side of it to feel how they might work in a perfect world. So that's kind of how I've been approaching this first couple weeks of this Saber class. Would be lots and lots of simple form type drilling, like we've learned, half of our strikes and parries, and a couple of guards, but nothing crazy, right? So a little bit of choreography there. And then we did a little bit of strike and block, unprotected, just I'm going to strike to this zone, you're going to block that zone. But that's choreography, right? And I'm hoping that before Christmas, I'll be able to let a couple people make up their own, 5 to 10 move choreographed sets.
Sure.
So what do you think, Alan? Is give us your high level approach or mindset on what choreography is, and just gloss it a little.
Choreography is in every single martial art, as you said. It just looks different in each one. A lot of times it is a single choreography. We call them kata or forms.
Yep. And
it is a simulated battle. And so if you think about choreography, that's all it is, simulated battle. We're looking at if imaginary or real opponent does this, I have to do this. You do that with a partner as well, And it just looks better because now everybody else can see what's in your head, because now you can do that. And there's group choreography and everything like that, trying to like with three or more people going through and doing like the same thing, the same maneuver, just like a dance routine, but with martial arts. So the good thing about choreography is that it will hone and refine the sequence of movements of where your arms and legs and body is at any given moment in your fight, depending on what you're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is story-driven choreography, and then there is combat choreography.
I'm glad you're getting into this. Keep going, but I was thinking about this as I was in the shower a few minutes ago, like the difference between these things, and I actually was thinking of them in the exact same terminology. So please continue with that. Sorry.
Yeah. So story-driven choreography is going to be usually for performance, so you're actually telling a story to a third person or an audience.
I generally think of this as being not necessarily for other martial artists as your audience.
Right. This is usually story-driven choreographies is meant for the masses. Anybody walking down the street, or
entering the movie theater or whatever.
Yeah, wherever you are, you're trying to convey emotion through the motion of your character in the form of a fight. Same thing happens in really good dance routines too. You can see the emotion conveyed between that, and that's one of the reasons people like musicals, because that's basically the character can't emote any more than having to sing and dance their way into telling you how they feel. Now, combat choreography is a different thing. It is usually based on. It's loosely based on telling a story. There's usually a good guy and a bad guy,
right?
But that's about as far in as
the forces of good and evil are at play. Go.
Yeah, and depending on the color of your costume, the color of your lightsaber, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But combat choreography, you're looking more into showcasing your martial prowess and your partner's martial prowess, trying to go through and do that. Case in point, there's a lot of really great stunt performers out there that will choreograph a fight scene using all sorts of aerials and really nonsensical movement.
Stuff that wouldn't work, quote unquote, in the cage, but
right.
It still takes some skill and martial arts knowledge to accomplish.
Yes, it is very, very martial and very, very skill worthy. It's not, however, practical usually in the frame that they put it. So a lot of them know that and they do it, but it's just too cool not to do. Right. To showcase, hey, look what I can do.
Right.
One of the best examples of this I can think of off the top of my head is hopefully one day we'll get him on the show, is our friend Scott Adkins. He actually does something that was passed to him by the guy that created it. He didn't create it, but he put it together and made it, his own thing. And it's dubbed the Guyver kick because it was first seen on camera on the movie The Guyver, where he basically does an inward crescent kick, misses on purpose, jumps in the air and kicks with his other foot as he lands on his shoulders, and then kips back up. So you'll see it in The Guyver. You'll see it in Undisputed 2, where he's Boyka. I think you see it in Boyka as well, and recently saw him do it in the recent movie with Dave Bautista, The Killer's Game. He does it again. That's like his signature thing in his in the choreography, is he does the Guyver kick. And it's awesome. It looked great. But, if you were to do that in a real fight, you'd crash, or if you missed, you're on the ground before you can kip up, you're going to be kicked in the ribs a bunch of times. So it's one of those things that just looks amazing on camera. It looks so good, and it takes a lot of skill to do, but is it practical? Probably not.
Right. Once in like every 100 years, one of these guys, this hasn't even been around for 100 years, but once every 100 years, somebody in the UFC will try something so fancy, right? Yeah. And sometimes it works just from the sheer sense that nobody else has ever or will ever try it. But
right.
It's kind of like when a Jedi uses the Force in a Star Wars movie, right? It's like those moments. It's like, well, there's no possible way that the Force is a real thing. Yes, I know some people just turned us off, but there's no possible way that the Force is a real thing that you can like push people around the room with. But of course, it looks super cool, so you got to put it in the fight scene. Same thing. You're not going to do a 540 crescent kick on somebody in a real fight, but God, if you have the film for it, then it sure looks good.
I mean, you could if they have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Every 100 years.
Right, but that's really the thing is when you look into choreography, again, it's simulated combat. There's no, like, it is controlled up to a point that you can control it. And I think one of the things that has to be said is that you can't do it by yourself. Right?
Yeah.
It has to be done with somebody showing you the choreography, somebody doing the choreography with you.
Excuse me.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Somebody doing the choreography with you so that you can actually show up and go, okay, this is XYZ, this is what's happening in this movement, in this form. What am I doing here? What did I get myself into?
Now you mentioned the story driven versus the combat driven, and I think you didn't use the word driven, but I'm going to add that word in just for the sake of conversation, because I think that's what it really comes down to, because you need a story no matter what. Otherwise, why are you fighting, right? Sure. But you also need good combat. Otherwise, who cares why you're fighting? So I think it's the driven part, right? Like if you're doing something at a Comic-Con, chances are you're going to do something a little more story driven, that has decent combat, right? But combat that every Joe Blow walking down the hallway can understand visually.
Right.
You can't pull out your most intricate martial combos where little moves are hidden behind other moves and things like that with that crowd. Now, with a combat-driven set where you might be, like I did lightsaber kata for my black belt. It was my test kata. However, I also did it a few years earlier for another test as choreography. And we were judged on the sword play, not the story. So our combat was everything. And our story was one guy with the red lightsaber ignites first and does a fancy flourish. Then the blue lightsaber decides he has to defend himself, so he does a fancy flourish, and they fight. Right?
Sure.
So it's a matter of, now that was for a bunch of black belts. So we were able to do things like wrist swiping and, moving your head around these tiny little slashes and things, and just intricate things that were a little more hidden, that took a lot more practice, and where we could actually kill each other if we missed. But with the story driven, it's not better or worse. You have to find a balance for the audience you're playing for. Now, if the audience is you, I personally think the combat driven is a good practice tool. It helps you get to a point where if you can do the combat stuff easily, you can make the story up to fit with it.
Right.
So it'll benefit you both ways. And I think, I don't want to speak for them, but I believe that like Saber Guild, which is a choreography-based group, they're all over the place, costuming and choreography. I believe they focus on simple martial arts combat techniques before they actually start teaching people choreography, which I think is a great way to do it, because a lot of times you'll see people just be given some choreography. They don't really know like what they're doing. They swing the saber one way, but they don't know that it's a cut, so to speak. It's those little things that sometimes the untrained eye doesn't pick up, But when you start employing them, untrained eyes become trained. Right. If that makes sense.
Right.
Am I off on too much of a tangent here, or is this a good springboard for you?
No, that's a good point. You don't want, if you're doing choreography, you usually have a reason for doing choreography, right? You're not just like doing it for you or for your partner. If you're doing choreography, you generally have a reason that you're doing it. So, for example, we have a group out here in Phoenix. We have a group out here that shout out to all my Syndicate Saber friends. So they just do choreography as a at our Phoenix Comic-Con. That's their big thing. But they do also fight, but they fight within their choreography rules.
Right, so they have their own, right.
They have their own like setting and setup and different Saber games that they play that are within their rules. So it does have to show up with different rules and different things. So it's a conversation, right?
So yes, I like that.
When you talk, when you're doing choreography, you're trying to evoke for the guy in the way back of the theater or the way back of Comic-Con, they need to know what's going on without being able to hear you say whatever you have to say.
Right.
So a lot of stuff has to be exaggerated, and yes, less martially sound usually, but still, it has to have some martial quality to it. Otherwise, you're just like swinging back and forth, and nobody's buying anything, right? Whatever you're selling, they're not buying.
You know, I think those little, like I said, you know, like with what I believe Saber Guild does, and maybe we should talk to, I know a couple Saber Guild people. We might be able to talk to a couple of them about this too. But I think a lot of the story-driven choreographers will say, we'll give them their druthers, and we'll call them what they wish to be. And I think a lot of people are like, if you have the creativity to even throw 10 moves together with your friend, I think you deserve a lot of respect. And on the same token, you deserve to have good technique, right? Because you're taking the time. I think if you're taking the time to practice and things like this, do it with a reason and to get better. So I think having a little bit of that basic martial knowledge, even just sitting in front of YouTube, like we've said over and over again, and looking at people who you think look good and trying to do it exactly the same way. I mean, that's a start, right? But I think like when you're performing to the masses, there are little things you can do, like we said, to where you start to train the untrained people. And one of those to me, and this is something that you can do whether you're experienced or not, you just have to use more control, is you actually have to aim for each other. You have to aim as if you're about to hit the person, because you are. They just know exactly what's going to happen. Now, I know there are some groups where they'll say like, okay, this zone, right? But yes, but like you can't be 18 inches away from the intended target and have people take you seriously, if that makes sense.
Okay, so you're talking about selling.
Yeah, for sure. Because that's what you are. When you get in front of people and you do a performance, you are a salesperson.
Yeah, so this is a big deal. And hey, people on the big stages, like Broadway, and if you are seeing any of the fights, the stage choreography fights there, you'll see people even on WWE, you know, when they have control of all the cameras and all the angles, you'll still see them mess up and not sell. Right. Or sell, or even worse, oversell.
Right.
You know, so there is a pocket where it has to be one, safe for both performers.
You don't want people coming out of there with broken limbs.
Right, but also you have to make sure that whatever it is that you're doing, whatever actions you're doing, whatever sequences you're doing actually make sense,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it doesn't make sense for you to, let's say, duck when I'm swiping low,
Right.
or
right.
jump when I'm swiping high.
There's got to swing over my head like by a foot, and I still duck all the way down to the floor. Like let's right.
So selling is a whole nother conversation.
Well, it's part of the story in a way.
Yeah. Well, this is what I mean. A lot of times you can get taken out of the conversation by bad selling, right?
So yeah, that's a good point.
This is a thing that happens now. If you have done your choreography a lot, with your partner, and you guys have trust, in each other, that selling gets better and better.
That's where I'm going with this. I'm glad you said that. That's where I was trying to pull that out of myself. That's exactly what I'm trying to get to with this is with the little bit of basic technique that you might have, or the oodles of experience. Maybe you're a lifelong martial artist and you just are getting into this kind of more regularly. Whatever your technique is, the better that is, the more you practice. Obviously, the more trust you and your partner will have for each other. And then you said something that's the selling gets easier. I think it gets more natural too. Like it just comes out of the fight. You know that they're going to swing for your right cheek, right? But they're actually swinging for your right cheek. Are they going to whack you as hard as they can? Absolutely not. Will they almost get there if you miss your block? Yes. And that's the thing that makes the audience go, right? That. Right. And I understand when you're training people like for stage, especially who have zero experience, zero technique, and you're just trying to make sure they don't impale each other with a fake sword. I get that. I would say that if it fits into your rehearsal schedule, maybe you should go see if a dojo will let you take a guest class or two. You need something. Bring in a teacher to do 2 hours of sword training one time and give you something that makes you look not foolish, right? Because I just think it, in addition to the fact that you just practiced and got better just by practicing, now you become more proficient and can do it yourself later, which is such an empowering thing. Like when you can put a bunch of moves together and they kind of look okay, and then you videotape it on your phone or whatever, and you're like, oh my gosh, it actually looks better than okay. And I did that. That comes with more practice to me.
Right. It comes with more confidence.
Confidence, with yes, well. Confidence, and that trust is developed thus.
Right.
So let's kind of unpack a little more. When you're starting with your, like, if I use this as a teaching device in my class, I start very simple. Like I give them 5 moves. Let's just say I use 5 and 10 a lot because it's easy for people to wrap their minds around.
Sure.
So like 5 moves, I'll give them the first 5, right? And then they'll work on that for, 20 minutes, half hour, whatever, perform for each other maybe in class. Then with the remainder of class, the 20, 30 minutes, whatever, maybe 15, you're going to let them do the same thing. Sometimes it'll be like, okay, start with 3 moves. And if you get to 5, great, right? But now it's your turn. You decide who's doing what, who initiates the first action, what the prescribed defense is going to be, blah, 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 the footwork, etc. Man, it takes people a long time to get 5 moves at first.
Right. Absolutely.
But it's cool to watch their brains start to like realize what their bodies know.
Right.
Is that I don't know if that was a confusing way to say that.
Well, with enough practice, right? And usually the numbers go in the imperial system of 10. So whenever you go into, let's say, form one, right? And you're going to go through it. Chances are you want to do it about 10 times in order for you to remember it.
Yeah, to start developing a little muscle memory.
Yeah, then, once you have done it 10 times, that 10 times 10 times you showed up to class becomes 100, and then again, exponentially 1,000 to 10,000. And once you've done it 10,000 times, then you can usually do it without thinking.
Yes.
Usually. Now, if you add another person onto that, it doesn't just double, it's actually exponential. You got to do it more.
You're like squaring the practice each time.
Yeah, you have to actually make sure that not only are you in the right place, but your partner's in the right place too. So it'll take a little bit of doing there. Now, if you add a third person, it's even more.
Yes.
Right? So a lot of times, especially when you see good choreography in movies and television shows, a lot of times it's just between two people.
Usually the best are between two. I agree.
Yeah, and then every once in a while there'll be somebody that'll be crazy enough to choreograph
Darth Maul versus
3 or more
Jedi. Yeah.
Yeah, but what happens there is actually what you usually have to separate.
Right.
One of the fighters so that you can focus on one too, because a lot of people can't track 3 things at once.
Yeah, and it's funny I brought up that particular fight. If you kind of slow down frame for frame, like what Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan are doing is so basic. So basic. Really, they're just there, and Darth Maul is in the middle of the two of them to highlight Darth Maul. Because Darth Maul is doing the selling for all 3 of them, honestly.
Right.
He is the martial artist, so he is selling that all 3 of them are good at martial arts.
Right. That's a good way to put it. It's a good, much like a good teacher will elevate a student.
Yes, exactly. I love that. Yes, exactly.
So a lot of times when you watch a lot of these things, you can tell when somebody is just a lot more trained than the other person, which is totally fine. And sometimes it's
part of the story, maybe.
Part of the story, or maybe it's just what the choreographer did.
Right.
But a lot of times you can tell, okay, when a couple things to watch out for, especially in movies. Live choreography is different, because if you mess up live, you're there. You gotta keep going.
Yep.
There's no take 2.
That is a good point too. But that's a whole topic for another day too, almost.
Right. But in movies, there's usually camera angles that help sell, and there's only ever one angle you can see them from. Whereas live, you have usually 180, sometimes 360 degree angles to sell to.
Right.
And then there's also, in movies, you have the magic of editing, so that you can kind of mask somebody's skill level, either up or down, depending on the cuts you make. Something that was pointed out to me was the newest Mortal Kombat movie actually has a really cool fight scene in the beginning with the Shogun himself, Hiroyuki Sanada.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very cool. And the first time I watched it, I was like, okay, this is cool. But it seemed very paced, right? There was no there was no amplification in the movement or the music or anything like that. And somebody pointed out to me is that there was an edit every 3 seconds in that fight. So you could literally go 1, 2, 3, cut to a different angle. 1, 2, 3, cut to a different angle.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, okay, I can understand why I didn't jump out of my seat with how cool that sword work was. It was mainly because of that. And even though the sword work was fine, and it, by all intents and purposes, the choreography was fire, the fact that it was edited that way made it diminished it just that enough to be okay, that's the beginning of the movie.
Well, you talked about,
oh my god, did you see that?
Yeah, I think it was you that talked about the Daredevil scenes.
Yes,
that's what keeps you in those scenes is that there aren't a lot of edits in any of them.
Right, and there's in the very first always seen they did it in one take,
Right.
even though they could have cut it in different ways, and they probably did, with some digital magic.
Sure. Or maybe
Still did it
they had a fresh Daredevil double in one room, or so.
Oh, they had three.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's a number of ways you can get around that stuff, but
right.
To your point,
yeah,
the selling is done by the editing, or lack thereof.
Correct. Well, because all right, so live choreography, which is what you and I are used to.
Right. Most Saber people are not in actual Star Wars movies, so.
Right. Or and if you are, call us up.
Yeah, please.
Send us a message.
Yeah, we want to have you on the show.
In any of the movies, actually, we're down to talk to you about fighting in movies too. Yeah. It doesn't have to be Star Wars, but it's just cooler if it is. If you
nice shameless plug, Alan. Well done.
Hey, I'm learning. I learned from you.
7th degree black belt and shameless plugs.
So, in live choreography, there are no takebacks, right?
Yeah.
You have to mess up like you mean it, right? So if you mess up, you and your partner have to both mean it and kind of move on.
Yes.
Quick as possible.
Yes.
And so whenever myself and my students and sometimes the people I associate myself with do choreography, and there's always like a let's get back to the choreography combo that we do. It's kind of like a bailout sort of thing, where you can see like, oh, I messed up, so we always go back to this one move.
Oh, right? Like a home base almost.
Yeah, almost. Yeah, every time somebody messes up, you go, okay, we're gonna take it from here.
I like that. You have a little safety net built right into your choreography. That's interesting. I've not heard that before. I like that.
And that works if it's live, right? If you're doing, if you're doing takes on a camera, it's just like, okay, cut. Let's start it from here.
Let's try again. Right.
Yeah. So a lot of times when you're doing live choreography, it might not be you that messes up.
Yeah.
It might be your partner. It might be the band that's standing next to you.
Right.
Or if you're doing it, on top of a stage, Kenny and I did choreography for an awesome Star Wars cover band called Galactic Empire, which is really cool. They allowed us to use their music and stuff. But they were here, and we got up on stage. We did our choreography to Duel of the Fates, of course, and they messed up in the song because I listened to it over and over again to try to get the choreography right. And I was like, oh, crap, they're at that part of the song again. So after I died, quote unquote, I got up and I fought Kenny again because they did that part of the song again. And then we did a thing and we fought again. And then after that, we're like, okay, I think that's it. I think they're done now.
I think we're finally dead.
Yeah. So, and you know what? They saw us do it once during sound check. They saw us do our fight during sound check. We had very little room, so like both guitarists had to step back and had to like hug, had to basically put their back against the drum kit and blah blah blah. Because we were both fighting with saber staffs, and then we were moving quick and we were moving fast, and they're like, "Holy crap, dude! These guys are just going at it." But the only reason that we were going that fast is because Kenny and I had been doing that
for
choreography for like 5 years.
Yeah.
Right. We put it together, and it was very slow when we put it together. But now, a year later, I don't remember. I don't remember it.
Well, I think
I don't remember, but it takes me like 5 minutes to get in there and go, oh yeah, my body wants to do this. Right. This is what we do next.
You said that. Oh God, you just said something that made me that triggered me in a good way. Well, you've been doing for a long time. Well, okay, so when you've been doing that choreography for a long time, and you said, you said we started out slow. Man, we're talking like molasses on a frozen day slow. Like so even 2 black belts with decades of experience. Yeah. Very slow. And it gets fast quickly, but
Mm-hmm.
like I really like hanging out in slow mode for a while because you really feel every single move. And to your point, makes you that muscle memory is more ingrained, and to the point where you don't actually have to necessarily remember what you're doing. You're 90%, your body's going to take you on an autopilot ride. So that we keep coming back to practice. I think that is both the point and the vehicle of choreography. The vehicle is practice and the point is practice. And I think it's one of the best vehicles for practice because you ingrain these prescribed reactions. Like I think of it as self-defense techniques, right? In karate class, when we do self-defense techniques, you don't just learn how to counter grab the shoulder grab and chop them in the bridge of the nose and side kick their knee. That's just the defense. You have to know what they did to make you react that way, which is they grab my shoulder and they're standing next to me in this particular case, right?
Right.
Well, okay. So there's 2 million reactions you could have, but we're going to train these 3 things in this order, and you're going to know not just those 3 things, but you're going to know the one thing that happened first, which was the attack. So you have to know offense and defense. Not just you have to know it, your partner has to know it. Okay, what the hell does that have to do with a choreographed fight scene, Fode? What I mean is, when you're in that slow mode and you're choreographing and you're learning your part, you should also be learning your partner's part. You should be able to take their position at any time, and they should be able to take your position at any time. And that is hella difficult. I would even say, don't do that if you're just starting out. Get to where your part is so incredibly solid. But then what'll happen is you'll start to understand the other person, what their body's going to do so much that you'll start to learn it anyway. And then when you get so much more experience, well, especially if you're the one with more experience, like when Bede and I fight and choreograph together, I have a lot more experience, but he's very visual learner. He's good at picking up on things. So I learn his part while I'm learning my part, but I'm also making his part up. So it's easier for me.
Right.
But then by the time he's learned his part, he knows exactly what I should be doing next. Like if I forget a move, he's like, oh, that's where you did this slash from that side. I'm like, oh, thanks. That is the kind of thing where now you don't have to sell it anymore, because now you're fighting. You just know what's going to happen next.
Right. You're flowing.
Yes. Thank you. Yes. Thank you.
And a part of that, right, is there is a point where you have to just be done doing choreography and
my gosh, that's a hard thing to know, right?
Do the performance.
That's a hard thing to know. When do I stop?
Yeah.
What's the last move?
Right.
That's a tough thing.
Well, a lot of it too. What I recommend, if somebody's never done choreography before, is to not just number their techniques. Like this is strike 1, strike 2, strike 3, strike 4.
Right.
You know, in succession. You know, or this is combo 1, this is combo 2, this is combo 4. You know, maybe have different
like pneumatic devices.
Different devices to do that. Again, I'm gonna shout out Syndicate. They have like almost a fun way of doing it by calling things by like different combos by different names,
like creature names, or
Yeah,
this is the Dathomir combo.
Yeah, or whatever. They'll call it the mix up, or the this is the 1 through 9.
And we do that in traditional martial arts. You know, like that technique I was just describing. One name for it is step and chop, right? But like, there's another one like scraping hoof. It's like it's just a way to remember a thing.
Exactly. So whenever you are, if you are starting choreography and you don't have a background in martial arts, maybe have like a name or a descriptor.
Yes.
You know, the first
this is a
couple
tennis
of techniques.
swing. This is where we do the pool cue. right?
Right.
Yeah. And actually, Bede uses terminology like that because he has no idea what the hell most of these things are actually called.
Right.
So he's always talking in like normal sport and game terminology. Like, this is my pool cue strike, right?
Right.
It's called a 5-stab.
And you know who else does that? Professional theater troupes do that.
Yeah, well, and corner coaches for MMA fighters do that stuff sometimes.
Yeah. Well,
this is the loop-de-loop combo, and that means step to the side, do a leg kick, and throw a hook. It's like
usually doing script reads, they'll create what are called story beats, and they'll put them in the script, and they'll mark something in the thing is like, this is when the emotion changes. Okay, we're going to call this the blah blah blah. Right. This is Hamlet's hot for his mom, scene, or this is Hamlet stabs a curtain. Whatever it is, but that's things that they know where they create their own jargon, right? So whenever you hear somebody say take it from the top, usually it means take it from the beginning,
right?
But, that might be something else, to you.
The head, that's another term that we used to use in jazz band. Take it from the head.
Yep. And then maybe like there you go, music. All right, well, we're gonna do the bridge.
The bridge,
take us into the bridge.
What the hell is the bridge?
Right,
it's the different part. Yeah. It's the part that sounds different. That's all I can tell you.
It's like, and then all right, take first chorus. All right, let's do this.
Yep,
okay.
Yep.
All right, go to the second verse. All right, and so there's all these names and stuff that are used by many other skill sets.
Yeah,
and it just makes it easier to remember later.
This is an element of this that I hadn't even really thought about too much. So another time I'm gonna say I'm glad you brought that up, because like I think a lot of times in the Saber fighting community, the choreographers kind of get looked down upon, and then in the choreography community, I think a lot of time they tend to sequester themselves to just choreography and won't dabble in real combat or learning actual martial arts.
Sure.
And I don't really blame either side for either of their opinions, because they're informed by the environments they choose to exist in. Like, if all you do is fight with people all the time, then you're just going to think that's all there is to it. And why would I do anything else? But if all you do is choreograph all the time and you get hit one time, it's kind of distasteful. You don't really feel like getting hit again.
Right.
So, there's a balance to be struck, for sure. I think it's easier to strike the balance when you come from a more traditional martial arts background. If you come from something that's a little more combat sports oriented, let's say kickboxing or, like tournament Brazilian jiu-jitsu, MMA, of course, or sport fencing, you're gonna care a lot less about things like kata or choreographed combinations or fight scenes.
Right.
But I think if you come from a more traditional martial arts background or a dance background, especially, like dancers love this stuff for sure. You understand what mechanically this can do for your body. And if you do both, if you spar and you do choreography and kata and things, you start to see where the bleed over occurs, because there is a bleed over. It's impossible to say that there's no such thing as like bunkai, we would say, like the practical application of choreography and kata in actual combat. That's a thing. It's a real thing. There's no reason why we would spend hundreds of years practicing forms in some styles if it wasn't real. Now, is it all real? Sure, but it's not all contextually applicable. And that's what you were saying many moons ago now in this conversation, is that things have to make sense for the situation that you're applying them to, right? Sorry, I need some water or something, but I think go ahead, take over.
In order to sell, in order to have good choreography, you do have to, much to the combat-minded choreographers are concerned, you still have to tell a story. There has to be a beginning, middle, and end to what you're doing. So chances are the ending is somebody wins, right? And then uh, the middle, the meat of it all is always cool. Sometimes the beginning is just to pump everybody up, but then the middle has to be really good, and the ending
Mm-hmm.
has to pay off what you just spent however long to do. Now a lot of that can be fixed really easily by good music,
Oh yeah,
and especially with Star Wars,
yeah.
definitely you can definitely get good music because John Williams is the man, and there's been so many fight scenes set to Duel of the Fates and Battle of the Heroes, and
Does it ever
all
get old?
these.
Not once.
Right. Well, you know that when you hear certain music, certain tones, like you go back to the place where you were when you first heard it, and that
That's a
excitement
good
comes
point.
in
Like if you're in a
and
Comic
pulls you
Con
in.
and you hear Duel of the Fates, you
Hmm.
know to start looking around for a couple hoods with lightsabers, right?
Right.
Uh, if you're at the beach and you hear dun, you know to not swim anymore. Like you
Right.
just
Right.
you have these reactions and things, and that's a silly one, but you're 100% right. Like if I was in a comic book store and I heard dun 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 dun, I'd be like, okay, who's doing where's the ILM signing? Like
Right.
where's Harrison Ford going to be today? Like
Yeah.
I
Look for the
just
brown fedora.
now I'm giving you music themes, right? Of course, but
Hmm.
that's what you're saying. And with Saber choreography, any fight choreography, actually, I think about Pirates of the Caribbean, that scene in the
Hmm.
blacksmith shop, right? Like the music
Hmm.
drives it.
Hmm.
Um, you know, you mentioned Scott Adkins, like all of his fight scenes, they've got music driving them.
Hmm.
Sometimes silence drives a good fight scene,
Hmm.
but you have to see the music in the silence then. Like, do you have saber clash sound effects going on? Is there vocal dialogue? Do you want to hear the sound of polycarbonate whacking polycarbonate? Maybe. Are you trying to hear like your uniforms flowing and snapping in the wind? Maybe. There's just, it depends on what you're trying to convey through the combat, through the story, right?
Right.
Music can save bad choreography, though.
Yes.
Good choreography is good choreography no matter what.
Right.
How do you know? This is subjective, but how do you know, Alan? What are some things? Let's say this. What are some green flags you look for in good choreography?
All right. So, what a loaded question that
Oh,
is.
I know. Oh, I know. I
So
know.
first and foremost, again, good choreography tells a story. I don't know how many times I have to say that, but good choreography has to tell a story.
Say it
There
for the
has to be
people in
a
the back, like you said earlier.
there has to be a beginning, middle, and end to your story. It should flow like a conversation, where one person is expressing themselves in one way, another person expresses themselves in another way, and if you're fortunate enough to do a group fight, maybe it's one guy shouting over all the others. So there is that, right? Sometimes if you have like a group together, you can have the one really bad guy that takes out like multiple people. Like Kamir in the Acolyte. He took out what, 7 Jedi. So
I
it's
know.
very much that sort of
Underrated.
like, okay, can I show you who this character is without him saying anything? Right? So character has to come first. Now, when you go into that, the character has to be expressed through good movement, which includes distance. It has to include measure. It has to include intonation, and it has to include. And some choreographers might disagree with me on this, but pauses. There has to be pauses in the fight. There has to be a point where there is I like to call it the hero pose, where
yes,
you just did something cool and you just stand there and look over your shoulder.
yes. It's like in 21 Jump Street. Throw this. Say something cool. And he goes, something cool.
Right. Yeah, and depending on the story you're telling and the intonation that you want, that might be something as cool as a cape flip.
Right.
Or something as easy as just like not saying anything at all and turning your back. It might be something like
just
that.
A stillness moment.
Because there's only so much air you can gasp, right?
Sure.
So, and you have to let the audience exhale.
Even in a group full of martial artists watching, we like a little perforation in our forms. Every kata does not have the same tempo all the way through. I shouldn't say every. If that's the purpose of certain forms, obviously, but for the most part, you do a kata. There's rhythm and timing, and it's not all the same across the board. There's syncopation, if you will, and I use that term perforate. I like to perforate Now, I don't like huge gaps. Like sometimes you'll see, and I think this is more with people who, like I mentioned, maybe don't have a lot of or any actual martial technique in their choreography. They're just a bunch of nerd friends got together and decided to do it, which is fine. That's the first step, trust me. But I think this is more common where they'll take these long pauses. They'll circle each other a lot. They'll do sort of maybe too much posing. That's sort of like a red flag to me. Maybe not that they don't know what they're doing, but I think that they're letting their own character kind of jump the ego train a little bit. And I don't mean ego in a bad way, like arrogant. I just mean like self-awareness, so to speak. The audience doesn't care that much. Like, It's not a real Star Wars movie. They don't care that much. You have to keep the action going after the pause. Pause means pause. Pause doesn't mean stop, right?
Right.
So I like how you said that's a green flag because it shows that you have rhythm. It shows that you have intonation almost. Dude, all these music terms, they're so parallel.
It's the same.
It's the same. It's dance. It really is dance, but it's dance with a martial a means to a martial end, if you will.
Right.
So I think you're right about that being a green flag, but it can be a red flag if you rely on stoppage as opposed to mild pausing, stillness once in a while. Okay, keep going. Any more green flags there?
Costumes and equipment are always good. I love watching saber fights, period, but nothing takes me out of it more than, t-shirt and jeans. Because I'm just like, okay, now you guys are just messing around in the parking lot. You're not actually telling me a story.
Right. Weren't there those two guys that used to, like, their story was like, so-and-so came in and shut my laptop, so we fought with lightsabers over it. That's maybe a time when a costume could be like it's just kind of funny. It's like, oh, it's Earth, but they decided that they were going to fight with lightsabers over this silly thing. And I forget who those guys were, but they had really good choreography.
But I mean, there is an annual lightsaber fight choreography.
Yes, I believe they won at least one of the years.
Yeah, and that part's cool, but again, that's the difference between taped versus
correct.
Correct. So because when you see good choreography, sometimes it's not the most martial, right? It just looks cool.
Right.
It's the coolest thing, and there are camera tricks and props and setups that are really neat, and you can start to see them like do it. And some of the flow artists out there can roll their sabers all over their body without the blade touching them, which looks even cooler with a lightsaber.
Cool. Yep.
And so it's really neat to see and do, but when you're actually, like, especially if you're seeing it live, you have to be able to mess up like you mean it. You have to be able to fill up and go. okay, well, that didn't work out the way it did in practice, but
I
okay,
like
we're
that.
going to just move on to the next piece, right?
Mess up like you mean it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it in a lot of um, in a lot of kata, in a lot of sets, there's a lot of people kind of take themselves a little too seriously, and they stop if they mess up a little bit, and they walk off the mat, and blah blah blah. I've seen that happen before.
Throw a little hissy
Um,
fit.
but yeah, but it's they're not mad at you, the judge, or anybody in the audience. They're mad at themselves, right?
Right. Right.
So, well, but if you are on stage, right? If you're in a performance, there is no going back. You mess up, okay, whatever, move on. And and the secret is this, and I don't know how many times I've said this to students when they're about to go on stage. 99.9% of the audience doesn't know what's next.
No idea.
So,
And wouldn't
if you
know
mess up,
even if you did it right or wrong, they
yeah,
would have no clue.
yeah, if you mess up, you meant to mess up, and now you're at this part of the form. Great. Oh, look, you did it twice in a row. You know what? Not a lot of people would notice.
Nobody noticed.
So, yeah, so it's okay to mess up. And sometimes the best things happen when you mess up. Now you have stories.
I think as a martial art, that's a good point. I think as a martial artist, it's even a young martial artist or somebody who's lower in the belt ranks trying to kind of earn belts or prove themselves or whatever the case is. You get caught up in that the thing. So obviously the people knowing or people watching know when I messed up. But your parents did not learn long form 3. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So when you're up there on stage performing it, they didn't know that two-headed serpent comes before, desperate falcons long before. They didn't know that. Right. So if you do desperate falcons at the beginning of the form, and then remember the two-headed serpent is so you guys hear the names we give these techniques. Then you just did it. Like, who cares? That's long form 3 as far as everybody else knows. And guess what?
Right.
When the next person gets up to show the same exact freaking form, they're not going to know that they did it differently.
Right.
They're going to have no clue. They're going to see them do the same moves in a different place and go, oh yeah, same form. Cool. Great job. You both did so excellent. Like, they don't care. Now, when you mess up with a partner, there is the risk of injury. So let's put this in the green flag category. First, messing up like you mean it, but part of that being able to mess up without injuring the other person. And the other person being able to pick up on that as well. And like you said, having that home base move or home base combination is kind of a great idea, especially if in the middle of the fight you just say like oyster shell, and like that oyster shell means this freaking move, right? Like,
right.
Yeah,
whatever your safe word is.
Right. That is a way to safeguard yourself, of course, from injury, but also to safeguard the audience from taking them out of it. And that's total green flag to me, because I, as a martial artist, might know that you messed up, but I don't care. I promise, I don't care if you do it great. I don't care at all. I tell students this all the time, because like in real sparring, Alan, how often do things work exactly as you plan them? I'll wait.
Maybe 10% of the time.
Yeah, maybe. And you can get it to, but it's a lot of luck is involved when that happens.
Right.
Timing, practice, all these things are great, and they all up your percentage. But of course, luck needs to be involved as well. And with choreography, you kind of get to take that luck part out of it because you're planning everything to the T. So plan well, practice often, practice at varied speeds, practice with your eyes closed. I know it sounds dangerous. It is. But you do these things and practice without the other person. You were right. You need a second person, but you also need to be able to do the moves in the air.
Right.
In front of a mirror.
Even if that second person is a camera.
That's right. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. That's a good point.
You need an observer.
I think about Vince with the lightsaber path. His video editing is outstanding. But it's just him in most of these videos.
Yeah.
And he's telling a story with his choreography, but it's just him.
Yep.
And the camera is the second person in his videos. And he is very aware of the clarity of movement required for that audience to understand what's going on. So, shout out to Vince because he's hella good, but also that part of it, he sells it to that camera. And in the TikTok world, the camera is the second person a lot of the time. Or the third person if you have a fight choreography and you're posting it online, that camera is a character.
You're right. Definitely.
Okay. So really quickly, I guess we're coming to a sort of a natural end, and this is not a topic that is over, so to speak. I feel like, we can definitely, like Seafood Damon, there's people we can definitely talk to about this that really understand what's going on. And I think a good way to start ending this is maybe just kind of shout out a couple things that really have impressed us over time. Like you mentioned Scott Adkins. I always think Michael Jai White, his approach towards choreography is very much that, where it's like, just because this is a good thing to do in fighting doesn't mean it's a good thing to do on camera. But just because it looks great on camera, don't try this in, a real fight because you get right. So that sort of mentality, but he's also a very well-trained martial artist. So his fight scenes come from a place of technique. You know what I mean? And he makes the people around him look better. So there's one, I'm trying to think of he's been in 800 million movies, but he was in one of the Never Back Downs with, what's his name? Scott Adkins. So there's one. Give me another person, or maybe a film or a show or something where you were like, oh man, that was the cream of the crops right there.
So if we're talking about movies that have great fight scenes in them, because of the cinematography and good martial artists.
Yeah, I like where you're going with this. Go.
So I always point out that The Raid, if you ever watch The Raid,
so good.
or The Raid 2, you don't have to watch the whole movie. Just watch, a couple of specific fights in the movie, and you can just see how the director understands the emotion that's being put into it, the movement that has to happen in order for this to work, and to sell the fight, even if it's just like a guy on the ground getting kneed. Right there's a bunch of emotion there. Another good movie, believe it or not, for fight scenes, not because they're martially sound, but because they're sold really well. Roadhouse is a good one. The new one, they did some fun stuff in.
Some of it was wildly violent.
Yeah,
where you'd be like, that guy wouldn't be walking tomorrow. But I think. Sorry, I thought you were gonna say that. Actually, that's why I said that. But
I was gonna say Fight Club.
Oh.
If you watch Fight Club, the sound effects make that movie.
Oh my gosh, Fight Club.
The intonation, even when when a guy that's not a fighter punches Brad Pitt, and Brad Pitt spits up a bunch of blood, smiling at him, laughing at him, and like there's an emotion that is being sold there that's just amazing, and just the reactions from everybody around them. That there's like a whole storytelling element that's just like beyond like punching and kicking.
Well, there's your prime example of well done story driven choreography.
Right. And then of course, whenever you're looking at like good martial prowess, I always like to point out, especially for swords, there is a couple of just like amazing like displays of swordsmanship. The Duelists is really good. And also there's oh man, I want to say it's called By the Sword, because Ring of Steel is a different one. But basically, it's about underground sword fighting, which is really fun. But the guys that are in it, you can tell, like, have been trained really well, know their choreography really well, and they're shot really well.
Yeah.
So when they are fighting, you're not really ever taken out of it, until the last fight, which you're just like, okay, yeah, whatever. But yeah, those are really good. And the thing about watching older movies, like the Shaw Brothers movies, and Gordon Liu. When you watch Gordon Liu, you know that guy knows how to use the stuff that he's using.
Yeah.
And a lot of the Shaw Brothers movies were really good at showcasing, like, look how much this guy knows.
Yeah.
Not if it actually really works, but look how much this guy knows and how many flips he can do.
Right.
And how innovative this is. And if you just want to watch just like a showcase of like amazing stuff, I always recommend a movie called Shaolin versus Ninja.
Oh.
And Shaolin versus Ninja is an amazing movie that showcases Japanese martial arts versus Chinese martial arts. And that's all. If you want to watch it, it's really good. They do like a comparison between the two, and very, very good. Like, the reason for them doing it, I think, is just amazing, because it's very 70s, very, very like old school storytelling, and you just, like, either you buy it or you don't. Are you in for this because that makes sense to me, or are you just like, okay, well, just show me something cool? Either one is fine, but it's one of those movies where I was just blown away by, like, all the cool stuff that happens in that movie. And they didn't have, like, a lot of wire fu back then. They may have made a guy jump a little bit higher, or like sold a guy jumping, like,
but we weren't quite the Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon level.
Yeah, we're not doing wire fu. This is literally a guy jumps in the air and then they cut and he's landing somewhere else. That's the kind of stuff. But in this particular movie, they don't do any of that. They just do all, like, there's no real wires or anything like that. They're just doing what they do, and they show off what they do in great ways. So that's always a recommendation for me for, like, good choreography. Watch that. And I can't get away with any sword fighting choreography that does not mention the Princess Bride, because that is a conversation on top of a conversation with very basic swordplay.
I was going to say Rob Roy.
Yeah, well, Rob Roy is another one, and that's a different conversation that they're having in that movie. But I'm specifically talking about the Chatty Duel.
Yes,
which is they're having a conversation. They're doing very rudimentary fighting in it, which is part of why they're talking so much.
Right.
And then there's some cool, like, things here and there, and you're just like, wow, these guys are amazing martial artists. And when in fact they're just doing, like, 1, 2, 3, 4, right, 5, but they're doing it in such a way, and it's shot in such a way that it's just literally a conversation. And then Rob Roy is a great, like, if you can make it through the first hour and a half of that movie, oh man, does it pay off in the last fight. And again, it's Qui-Gon versus Tim Roth. So very cool.
Qui-Gon versus Abomination. How much better can you get? So I'm gonna come out of left field a little bit with some of these picks for me. One of them being I was half joking about Rob Roy, but it is a fun sword fight, kind of old timey, and a couple of swords that you don't always see, or at least the back sword, you don't always see that in media. So kind of a cool, just, a little sword nerd element to that, the Scottish backsword. But there is a movie from, oh gosh, there it is. It came out in 2011. It was a Three Musketeers remake. I believe Orlando Bloom might have been in it or something.
Yep. And Mila Jovovich.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That actually had some pretty cool fight scenes and really, really neat ways to show some traditional like French swordplay, but and Spanish, of course, but in non-traditional physicality. It was very interesting. Some of the way the movie is, kind of crap, but.
So are you talking about the Three Musketeers remake, or are you talking about The Musketeer?
No, not The Musketeers. It's called The Three Musketeers. It came out in 2011. Okay. The Musketeer is a whole different thing.
Yeah. So that one was done by a Hong Kong stunt team.
Right.
Telling the same story.
Right.
Which was great because they literally stole from themselves.
Yes.
Like the very last scene in that movie was incredible because it was exactly what they did in Once Upon a Time in China.
So let me then take us on a little trip to China real quick. So
I think that was Tim Roth as well.
You might be right about that. Anything Donnie Yen touches is pretty much going to turn to platinum. But in particular, I'm very fond of his first fight scene in Rogue One, where he uses his staff. And I think the storytelling and the martial arts play off each other so incredibly well in that scene. Sure. And then I think it's Ip Man 2, where the like boastful guy comes into the village and tries to take on all the martial arts masters.
That was one.
Is that one? And he's like, my wife said we can't break anything, right? Like, that particular sequence is so incredible to me. I can't even start to scratch the surface of what that sequence like showed me as a martial artist. Just the variation, the intricacy, it's just wild. Plus the camera angles and everything. It's a true masterpiece. It's a true masterpiece. So that's almost in a class all of its own.
Sure. If you want to see a really good sword fight scene, speaking of Donnie Yen, there's a scene in a series called Seven Blades. It's it's a little mini series, but once Donnie Yen fights, it's awesome because he basically does groundwork, which is in Chinese ditong.
Yep.
Which you'll see like a guy rolling around on the ground and doing what's called flower rolls and, doing all that stuff. But in that particular series, he does a fight in a narrow alley and he does ditong in between the walls. So it's just like this thing that happens and you're like, wait, what did he just do?
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that was possible, sort of thing. And you know what? It's one of those things where like you see it once and you're like wowed by it, and then if you try to like slow it down and watch it again, and so you come to a quick realization like, okay, that is not possible nor practical.
Well, that's
but it was really cool to see.
That's Ong Bak to me. So I'm gonna bring up Ong Bak. I think Tony Jaa is just magnificent as well. He's the Thai Donnie Yen to me. But with a little bit of Jackie Chan thrown in. Another guy who's in a class all of his own because the storytelling comes out of the martial arts for Jackie Chan, but the martial arts isn't like it's. I mean, of course, his old movies were, but his newer stuff like Rush Hour, things like that, like it doesn't strike you as like a traditional martial arts fight scene. It's very like silly and but so good. Anyway, Jackie Chan, amazing. That he's probably the one person who got me into choreography as a martial artist. But let's talk about Tony Jaa for just a hot second, because Ong Bak brings up a lot of things that people who do Muay Thai don't even know exists in their martial art.
Right.
Like kata. He does loads of kata in Ong Bak. He does...
And Ong Bak too.
Yes. And Ong Bak too, he does more varied stuff with weaponry and things like that.
Yep, he actually does 5 Animal Kung Fu in that too.
Yep.
And Drunken Fist.
And in the first one, he fights MMA in a nightclub pit fight. He fights, in the streets, running, literally free running through the streets and doing aerials and things through impossible obstacles and but he does prescribed techniques when he's doing his kata and things. He's calling out the names of these techniques, like we said earlier in this episode. Elephant sits on stump. Boom, 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 and it's an elbow with knees and, blah, blah, blah. Like, a lot of people who will tell you they've been doing Muay Thai for 30 years wouldn't even be able to tell you the first thing about some of these things. And that's not a knock on them. That's just the evolution of how that particular martial art is going. But, like, I like Muay Thai because it's part of MMA, but I'm also a karate guy, so I appreciate that Tony Jaa shows Muay Thai in this light. It's the same light that I view karate through. So I really love that. And then, of course, like, your Donnie Yen and your Jackie Chan, that's the same thing with Kung Fu. Donnie Yen shows the more traditional side of this thing. But then, like, Jackie Chan shows how, like, some just silly Asian superhero would take care of business. And I think for me, that's kind of like the Mount Rushmore, if you will. But I'd also like to say, like, Blade and Blade 2, like some of the stuff, the little hidden movements and things that, to be a martial artist, the way you appreciate him, the way he'll stab people, or, he'll do an elbow and like, or, he'll stab and then he'll drive the knife deeper with his elbow or something. Like, that's the kind of stuff.
If you want to see my definition of dramatic pause, Blade.
Exactly.
Dramatic pause.
Exactly.
In fight scenes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And of course, lately, just because he made me think of it, I thought the movie Deadpool and Wolverine was not great, but I loved the choreography. It was well done. Incredibly well done. And then finally, I would say that anything Captain America's in. Or Spider-Man, because the Spider-Man fight style is so unique, and
it's evolved over the years, right?
And it's evolved like the Batman fight style as well. The Christopher Nolan Batman fight style is such a unique and evolved, and the way that they tell you, if you look at some of the behind the scenes for the Christopher Nolan Batman, the way that they tell you about how this is the character, like the fight style is the character is the fight style. And the way that they describe, I can't do it justice. Go look through the YouTubes for this stuff from Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. It's just, we're naming superhero movies for a reason, because these are the movies, and martial arts movies, right? Like Donnie Yen. These are the movies that show how the heroes would really be. And these are fantastical things. Like there's not a real Spider-Man, but Tom Holland can do a lot of these things without help. And that helps you believe that Spider-Man is real, right? You're like, damn, Spider-Man's a badass. And you're like, he's not real. But if he was, that's him. Same thing with Blade. You're like, if there was a real vampire, half vampire hunter, that's what that dude would fight like.
Yeah. And that's again the crux of the thing that we talked about. Good choreography tells a story,
Yeah.
and
Maybe
tells
that's
you
the
about the character, right?
that's maybe that's the final point we leave everybody with for the 100th time. Good choreography tells a story. A good story is made apparent by good choreography.
Right.
This
And speaking of which, I have to make a retraction. I said the wrong name a couple of maybe I don't know 5, 6 episodes ago. The guy that trained Robert Downey Jr.'s name is Eric Orm. I think I called him Jeff or something like that. But
oh
it's Sifu Eric Orm,
oh I
and
appreciate.
he actually also trained Christian Bale for Batman Begins.
Oh well, there you go. That is very cool. And actually, just really quickly, the Batman Begins style. Like if I had to put two, like martial arts on it, I would put probably Muay Thai and like. Would you just say Kung Fu for what Robert Downey? Would you just blanket it in Kung Fu, or would you call it a specific style?
So he learned specifically Wing Chun.
Okay, right.
So he learned that, and the core of a lot of what, to my understanding, the core of the same principles of Wing Chun also apply to Batman with a little bit more, emphasis on Hapkido and
Right. The striking is very elbows and hammer fists and knees.
yep.
But the trapping hands, the way that
Mm-hmm.
he'll use two-handed control for certain strike, but then it becomes a joint lock, and that's all straight out of Wing Chun, straight out of,
Yep.
like you said, Hung Gar, as well as
he does a double fist punch that's straight out of Five Animal Kung Fu,
yes.
and
And the way that he
out of
throws some of
Shaolin
the
Kempo.
elbows and stuff, that's right out of those Ong Bak movies. The elbow and the hammer fist are the two main Muay Thai strikes with the arms. A lot of people think it's your boxing moves, but it originated with the elbows and the hammer fist. That's why a lot of sport Muay Thai purists insist that knockouts come with elbows. That's they call them gem stars. That is what you want. And anyway, I just you start to see these things. You start to pick apart, if you're a martial artist, kind of like what styles you're sniffing. And if you're not a martial artist, it can help you learn like the physicality of these things. How do people move with this weapon and that weapon? And, when they're in this emotional state, that emotional state, good choreography can teach you all these things. Anyway, I think that's a natural place to finish for now, we'll say, because I feel like this topic should and will come up many times over. I'd like it to be more a part of the martial arts conversation than it is usually. So yeah, this is a fun episode for me. Thanks, Alan, for diving into this one with me.
Yeah. And hey, if you're a choreographer out there, come join us in LA at Saber Mania.
Yes.
Memorial Day weekend.
I'm hoping that we have some good news here for people who can make it to Ohio as well, but I can't say anything just yet. But that will include people who are good at choreography and kata as well, not just our Saber fighters that we love. We love you choreography people as well. So we're planning some events, LA, something potentially in the works here, and. I know we've talked about it with the Virginia guys as well and Kay as well. This is something we want to incorporate more in our martial arts events. So, and by the way, if you know of a martial arts tournament happening near you, you don't have to be a martial artist. Go buy a $5 to $15 spectator ticket. It's good for the whole tournament, which is great. Usually it's multiple days. And go watch people who know how to use weapons do their forms. Do their choreography. Do their fight scenes and their self-defense choreography. Or go to a fencing tournament and watch people actually fight.
Come see us at Phoenix Wushu Nationals in March.
Yes.
Yeah, if you're
go to Capital Clash if you're in the DC area and check out our homies from USA Light Fencing.
And traditional fencing in that.
Yes,
in that
exactly. And because Chad and USA Light Fencing does base a lot of their stuff on Chinese martial arts, not just actual fencing, you're going to see a lot of cool stuff. So, the Arnold Martial Arts Tournament, I guess I'll just say that's what we're looking into, but that is another thing that if you're into, if you're in the Ohio area, that's a huge martial arts tournament, all different styles, MMA, kickboxing, all kinds of stuff, plus other sports. But I'm trying to think, there's the Capital Classic in DC, which is a martial arts tournament that is usually in, I think, the summertime. AmeriKick is a great organization that runs tournaments all over the place, particularly in Philadelphia, but all over the place. AmeriKick. So I'm just giving you guys a couple, look at SoCal Sword Fight. They do events all the time. They're a European martial arts group. So I'm just trying to give people an idea. There's Kendo federations. Look into the Kendo federations. You might be able to buy spectator tickets for these kinds of things. Go have fun. Go to the Renaissance Fair in your state or your county, and talk to a blacksmith who makes axes and swords and stuff for fun or for money. There's a lot of cool stuff that comes out of this world of choreography. And it's a good thing to incorporate into your martial arts training. So I've had a great time. Absolutely. Please visit us, sabermartialarts.life. Check out our YouTubes. Check out our Patreon. Become a patron. Learn martial arts with us. We can teach you all you want to know. And
more.
Yes. And please subscribe. We can't say it enough. We appreciate all of the people who care enough to listen to more than 2 minutes of us. But we really appreciate you because you have stuck around this long and you've stuck around for this many episodes potentially. So thank you very much. Shout outs to anybody out there who loves a good lightsaber, because we know that when we see you, you will bring your own saber.
This party's over.